All right, so last week we talked about Abraham and kind of his faith being credited to him as righteousness, and how a lot of us have stuff. In our past, we have stuff that we're trying to overcome. We have stuff that can easily hold us back. We kind of, metaphorically, obviously have Hagars in our past. And in looking forward, because of faith, we got to know and be confident that we're righteous. We're going to talk a lot more about that today, but we can leave a measurable legacy through our next decision and the one after that. Because really, success in life is really a series of making good decisions. You don't have to make all of them right. You're going to make some wrong because you're human. But it's working on improving that and for, being, not trapped in the fruitlessness of transgression and sin. I think a lot of us sometimes feel like we're kind of trapped. Just keep making mistakes, but that we've overcome the justification through Jesus. So we're moving to Romans chapter 5 today, and really looking at the idea of glory, future and present. So this is kind of like an exciting, because we all like glory, right? Movie The Replacements, glory lasts forever. Chicks dig scars. Anyway, you guys don't even know what the shoes are, so I'm not bothering making cultural references. My bad. Make an Andy Griffith reference. I don't know. Yeah, exactly. Gonna say too bad I didn't watch Andy Griffith. All right, future. All right, so Romans chapter 5 verse 1 says, "Therefore, since we have been justified through faith, we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ." So, therefore, in biblical terms, when you're reading the Bible, it says therefore, it's linking what was said to what is being said. So it's not just meant to be a really fun transitional word for chapters. It's actually a connection to where you've come from and you're reading to where you're going. And so Paul says therefore, so based on the legacy of Abraham and based on justification through faith, through Jesus Christ, he says, therefore, since we have been justified through faith, we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ. So we have peace with God. The idea of peace is an interesting discussion because it infers that there at some point in time was not peace. And that's one of the things that we have to remember is that when we sit there and say that we have peace with God, it means that if we are not justified through faith, we are at enmity with God. That we are basically at war with God. That there is unrest. That is a difficult situation. It's a questionable situation. And I think, it's learning how to embrace peace, and that peace that only comes through
Wow.
You should be sitting next to a pond or something. Having one of those, gosh darn it, I like me moments. So what was that? That was beautiful. All right, so peace only came through mediation, through Jesus Christ. Mediation. That basically our peace was brokered through what Jesus did for us. And as we've sort of transitioned through Easter, we understand that our salvation is sort of this brokered deal, where Jesus sat down and he mediated. And basically what we had to bring to the table is faith. And what we had to bring to the table is that willingness to trust what he said, what he's doing. And what God brought to the table is everything else. And so we end up with this situation. And Ellicott said that the state of reconciliation, this is his definition of peace, which I think is really kind of, it's very big, very tranquil. He says the state of reconciliation with God, with all that blissful sense of composure and harmony, which flows from such a condition. That basically when we are at peace, when we have that moment, there is a sort of a blissful harmony. There's a sense of composure. That everything's all right when we're at peace with God. And peace is one of the things that I've always stressed when it comes to peace is the idea that peace is an active thing. It's not a passive thing. We're not at peace because we can suddenly nap. Now, nothing wrong with napping if you're a napper, but the idea is that that's not necessarily peace. In terms of peace is an active role, but for a lot of us, I think we kind of struggle with a lack of it. We struggle with a lack of peace when it comes to our situation, where we sit with God. I think for a lot of us, we struggle with this sort of war, and then we have to ask ourselves, why do we feel this? Why do we feel a lack of peace? And And for us, it could be a lot of different questions, a lot of different things, but we sort of struggle with this battle of flesh and battle of the spirit, but at the same time, do I feel like I have peace with God? Do most of us, when we, go to bed at night and when we wake up in the morning and when we spend our time and we read the Word, do we feel like we're at peace with God? Or do we feel like, man, I'm not really sure where I am. I'm not really sure what's going on. And we have this idea that we sort of have to continue to re-up. That we got to get back to, basically re-upping our faith and re-upping our peace with God and sort of just working through the treaty, that we got to revisit the treaty over and over and over again, just to make sure that peace stays. Like, that we're two warring factions that can't get along. And, it may be any of those questions. Do we not trust our own faith? I mean, how many of us sometimes question that we have enough faith? I hope there's a few of you that do. I do all the time. That, is it really something that's laid anchor deep? Do we focus on our missteps and not see Christ? A lot of times that can really cause a lack of peace when we start looking at our works and we're going, oh gosh, man, God can't be happy with me at all. And if God's not happy, there's not peace, right? So as we have this connection, that we're concerned, do we somehow feel unworthy of reconciliation? Do we not trust the Word of God? That to me has always been the biggest thing, I think, for me when it comes to the times in my life, is I find myself not trusting that God says, no, it's good. And I'm like, no, it can't be. And God says, no, it's good. Just go ahead and read it. That was pretty clear. Faith, you are justified through faith by the mediation of Jesus. And then I always sit there and say, no, there's got to be more. Right? I have to bring more to the table than just faith. It's too simple that it's just faith. And therefore, if I feel it's too simple, then I feel like I'm not doing enough. And if I feel like I'm not doing enough, then there's always going to be a little unrest in my soul. There's always going to be a little concern because I'm not doing enough, because I'm not doing it right, because, I don't trust. And do we lack faith in His promises? Where He says, I promise, that this is what I have for you because you've done this, because you have faith. And I think sometimes we get sort of confused in the dichotomy of, it always seems like in the church there's people who are too much at rest, and there's people who are not enough at rest. Right? You know what I'm talking about? You get like the Martin Luthers, right? If any man doth describe salvation, even the very least, to the free will of man, he knoweth nothing of grace, and he hath not learned of Jesus Christ. And this is the same guy who also said that, if you drink enough beer, you'll sleep more, and if you sleep more, you can't sin as much. So therefore, drink beer. And I'm not making that up. Right? Martin Luther said that. Okay, it was more Duffy, but that's what he said. He said, the more I drink, the more I sleep, the less I sin, the more pleased I may God. Right. So, it always seems to me like the church is full of like one of those two extremes, right? That like, I'm not doing enough, I can't believe it. And then you have those people who are like, how can you sleep? And you're looking over and you're like, how are you sleeping right now? You can't be sleeping right now. Get up. There's just too stressful. And it's like, no, I'm good. You can't be good with God because you're kind of a disaster. And basically we have the Martin Luthers, and we have the people who are, just struggling, and they're constantly at this state of unrest because they feel like they just don't do enough, that they feel like they just aren't having it, that they haven't expressed enough faith to really genuinely be at peace with God. And then we have people who sometimes we sit there and say, I think you're a little too trusting. You might want to do a touch more, just a touch. And I think we always have those sort of warring factions. And so Paul goes on to say, through whom we have gained access by faith into this grace in which we now stand. And we boast in the hope of the glory of God. And that's a really big statement. And there's a couple of key words in there I think are very important to where we're at. So as we sort of unpack it a little bit, it says, through faith in God, we have access to grace. Simple statement. So God presents that grace in our lives to be attained through faith. So we have access to grace because of faith. And grace is what we can't give ourselves. It's basically favor that we don't merit, that we have not given enough to do. And so that through faith in God, we have access to that grace. And then it says that grace in which we stand it's what we're standing in. And to me, that is one of the key words in the whole, in this whole area, this whole portion of Romans 5, is it says it's grace in which we stand. And the word stand means holding ground. It doesn't just mean that we stand and we have presence in it. It means we actually hold ground upon. And so in this case, we're not sitting or cowering. We're actually standing in strength, in grace. And I think sometimes we look at grace and we don't understand that we're supposed to basically go stake a claim. Go, that user post a flag, right? And claim it. And we find ourselves, sometimes kind of hoping it's going to come over to us, and we don't realize that we're supposed to stand strong. And going back to Martin Luther, and basically his simplicity, is that's where we're supposed to be as Christians. And a lot of times when we torment ourselves and we find this lack of peace, it's because we haven't staked our ground in grace. We've staked our ground in works, we've staked our ground in what we do, we've staked our ground in other areas, instead of understanding that our faith brings justification and we stand with strength in grace. Christians are not supposed to be constantly hitting themselves with boards and bricks and stones to make sure that we are sufficiently punished for our sinfulness. We are supposed to stand in grace, that we are supposed to sit there and say, it's okay. I have faith in Jesus, I have faith. And because of that faith, God has granted me the grace and the justification upon which I stand. Christians are supposed to be supremely confident. I mean, that's why if you look at the very next phrase, it says that we are to boast in the hope of the glory of God, which means that we are to be confident. We stand in confidence in the grace and the hope of God. That does not resonate as a meek, well, I sure hope Jesus loves me enough to let me into heaven. I sure hope I'm doing enough. Yet that seems to be predominantly the attitude of the church in Mass, is that we look at it as this attitude of, I'm just doing what I can. When Paul says, no, we're supposed to stand confidently, that we're supposed to proclaim confidently hope, that we're supposed to basically proclaim an understanding that we have this wonderful future, this glorious future in front of us because of what God has done for us, that we have basically attained this moment, that we stand strong in that grace. And I find myself always battling back and forth on this. That there are times when I step out of that grace for just a minute and I think to myself, I'm not doing enough. I have not achieved it. When Paul is saying, no, we stand in it. Where else would you stand as a Christian? Yet a lot of times we stand as Christians on the outside looking in and going, I don't think I've done it. I don't think I'm there yet. And I go back to a friend of mine who's just to show the diversity of my friends. He's an accomplished, which probably should stop there. But anyway, he's accomplished French horn player. Okay? And no, it's a real thing. And he's one of the best. One of the best in
French horn playing world.
Yes, all 38 of them. He's in the top 38. Anyway, no, I mock him like this to his face. Anyway, he's my roommate for 2 years in college. It's legit. He'll tell you it's the hardest instrument in the world to play. And considering he can play all of them, I'll go up places. Anyway, so he is this accomplished French horn player. And I went to one senior recital in 4 years in college. One senior, that was his. And I listened to him play French horn for like 45 minutes. It's a beautiful instrument. It's just a lot of...
Isn't it like a little tuba?
If you've ever heard Star Wars...
Like a Roman tuba.
Right. Yeah, it's a little tuba. It's a special little tuba. By the way, I tried to play it one time in the room. I am not. I couldn't even get it to make sound. I was all...
It makes a lot of air.
Going on here, bro, your horn's broken. Anyway, and he just mocked me. That's just cool. I get it. I'm taller than you. But anyway, so he's this accomplished return player. So we were talking one day because he knew in college that he was in the upper tier already. We're talking back, he was 20, 21 years old, and he plays with the Utah Orchestra. He travels the world. He just got back from China. Anyway, he's so good. And we were talking one day about that, and he was talking about confidence versus arrogance. And because he made a comment about how good he was. And one of our friends goes, "Hey, would be arrogant, dude. The Bible says be humble." And he goes, "No, that's not humility. Humility is not lying about what you can do in order to make other people feel better." He said, because for example, and I remember this, 20-something years ago, and I still remember, like, just thinking to myself, wow, that's going to really change the way I look at stuff. And he said, if a kid wants to play French horn, anyway, if a kid wants to play French horn, and he comes up to Pete, and he goes, sorry, you gotta be there with me and Pete. Anyway, the kid wants to play French horn, and he comes up to Pete, and he goes, you did an amazing job. Because there's all these, especially because we were talking about this the night of his recital, and there was all these top-notch people that are listening to it. And he goes, and this little kid walks up to me and he says, I want to play. I think you're amazing. He goes, if I look at him and go, no, I'm not. I made a lot of mistakes. I messed up here. I dropped it here. I didn't hit the right note here. He goes, what does that say to that poor kid that really wants to play French horn? He will never be any good. Because, he goes, the real response is, thank you very much. I've worked very hard to get to this place in my life, and I'm confident in my skill set. And I remember thinking, what an interesting dichotomy to sort of the false humility that sort of encompasses a lot of what we say sometimes when people are like, that was really great. And in your heart, it was like you nailed it. And you're like, I just did my best. That's not true. The truth is, I've worked very hard to get here. I worked very hard on it. And, because then that instills confidence in them that they can get there. And I think what happens a lot of times is when in the Christian world, it's the same connection. When people walk up and go, you are an amazing example of a Christian. I got to admit, I admire your faith. And if we go, I sin a lot. I drop the ball. I'm awful. I'm terrible. What does that say to them? We think in our heads, we're giving them a pass on ever being too hard on themselves. But the reality is what we're saying is, you're never going to really achieve a much higher level than where you're at right now, so don't bother. But when it comes to grace, we sit there and we should stand confidently in it and go, man, you know what? I love grace. I live in grace. I make mistakes, but man, grace is awesome. I stand in it firmly. It's tremendous. It's wonderful. It makes me feel a lot of confidence. I'm stoked. I'm going to heaven someday. One of the worst things you can ever say to somebody is, are you excited about heaven? If I get in, right? Because they're going to go, oh, wait, there's a chance that I have faith in Jesus and can't get in? Right? That's the worst. What you want to say is absolutely, I'm excited. My future glory is amazing. I am stoked about my eternality with God. I am stoked about eternally spending time in heaven, and I'm stoked about the incredible beauty that's going to come with time in heaven. Instead, most of the time we go, I got a long way before I get there. Dude, don't drop the ball, right? And kids are just going, I will never be any good at anything. I can't do it. And I still remember Pete saying, it's about confidence, to be able to say, it's not arrogance to be confident. And so Paul says, listen, we are confident, we boast, we are strong, we understand, we know. And that's the reality of it. That's where we're supposed to be. That's the idea of sort of this, unpacked concept of future glory, that only by the willingness of God do we have access to grace. But we're to stand in it. And think about how many times in your rememberable past, that's a hard word. I'm not even sure it's a word.
Is it a word?
In the Greek, you can take any And a prefix or suffix to it. So the facticity of what I just said is correct. Rememberable past, right? Also, I could say rememberableness of things in your past. Or unrememberableness.
All right.
Pre-rememberable? Anyway, rememberable, dang it. Rememberable past. Gosh, I can't remember the words I make up. If you look back, I mean, how many times in your life have you been asked or complimented or whatever when you realize, when it comes to your faith or when it comes to, or you're talking with somebody about faith, that you didn't stand confidently? That instead you tried really hard to, portray humility, or, when really all you did was basically pass off confusion and insecurity. When we look at somebody and somebody says, I admire you, or you know what, I hope someday to be like you, or I hope someday, the best thing you can say is you can. It takes time, but you can get there. And like I said, my friend who was making a comment about French horn taught me more about how we're supposed to approach grace than anybody that's ever sat in the pulpit and told me how important grace is. Is that we're to stand confidently. The implication of standing is that we're firmly footed in confidence. We are standing strong. We are not cowering. We are not stooping down. And we always have hope, and that hope never fails. That's the future glory. The present glory is a little different. So future glory is about heaven and justification, right? Because it's not, sometimes we whittle it down to heaven, but the reality is it's about God going, you're justified. And knowing that you're eternally justified in that, that there's that you can rest in that. And so it says, then not only so, but we also glory in our sufferings. Now this is where it's less cool, right? We glory in our sufferings because we know that suffering produces perseverance, character, and character, hope. We take understanding of context into our sufferings. We did a panel at MC this week, which I thought was a lot of fun, because I sat on this panel with all these people that had doctorates in front of their names, and we answered questions that the kids had. The number one question, it was very close, but the number one most commonly asked question amongst kids is, why is there so much suffering? Why does God allow suffering? And it was really interesting listening to the different, I sat up there and I was like, well, we need to have, some monkey the kids can understand, all these smart people. But it was like listening to all the different answers, and listening to what people had to say and why suffering is there. And it was interesting, everybody kept pointing to this sort of, the alleviating of suffering. Everybody kept talking about, why God doesn't alleviate suffering, why, how it's sinful nature, how we brought sin into the world, why, that because of sin we will always suffer, because of sin there will always be this, because of sin there will always be that. And I'm sitting there that whole time and I'm thinking to myself, yeah, but sufferings have an impact, they have a value on us as Christians. That we see sufferings differently. When we sit there and I know it's about alleviating suffering, and I get it, except, that Paul says, listen, we see as Christians our sufferings differently. And he says not only, but we also glory in our sufferings. Okay, only a crazy person suffers and seeks glory in that suffering, right? That's just lunacy. The idea that we would glory in our sufferings, except that without them, and we glory in sufferings all the time. Well, people who work out glory in sufferings all the time, right? Not we. I don't get there. But they do, right? Lifting weights, it hurts a little bit, I hear. And then all of a sudden, but you look amazing the next day, right? You're like, check it out, I'm glorying in my sufferings. I glory the smoke of bacon onion rings. I pulled them out and I was all ready. Oh, it was amazing. This cake. Anyway, you put it on a baby's head. The idea that is that we take this idea of context. As Christians, it's a little different. When we see it, we think, there's a reason I can use this. I have gotten more mileage out of my sufferings than any victory I've ever had in helping people. It's not even close. I get so much mileage out of helping people because of my sufferings. And I learn more about myself through sufferings. Now, there are times when I wish I could be challenged more by learning about myself through all my victories, but for the most part, I learn through my sufferings. And Paul says that we take glory in our sufferings because we know that there is going to be a value to them. We know that they are teaching us something about ourselves. We know that we are learning about what's going on. And we are becoming, we are developing perseverance because he says, listen, because we know. The reality is, to me, that is such an interesting, big 3 words. Because we know. You know, the Bible's basically saying, look, the more you know, right? I mean, the more you know, this is a good thing. We're learning stuff. But it's amazing to me how little we appear to know at times. It is amazing to me in our present glory as Christians how many times I see Christians throw the proverbial clipboard up in the air and go, I got nothing. Right? And God's like, I've gotten you through all these things. I've seen you through all these things. And every time, oh man, I'm down 2 points in life. It's over. I quit. And I find it so amazing how many times you see that in the church. It's because we don't know. I'm just being real. We haven't learned. We haven't learned about what God does. We haven't learned about, when you start bringing something to somebody's attention, which I do a lot with the teenagers when they start talking to me about somebody, my parents are awful, my life is terrible, it will never get worse than it is right now because they won't let me have an iPhone, and I'm talking to them, and sometimes these kids really bring forth real sufferings, okay, and there's a lot of real suffering. Belittling suffering simply because they're teenagers is unfair. The reality is there's real suffering in many of them, and you're sitting there and you're talking to them, and they start kind of spewing out this information, and finally, inevitably I always turn it to, and who in your life could really use help with that? Like, who in your life could use your testimony? And they always go, who? What? And I always go, well, who do you know is going through the same thing? Maybe a few months behind you. And they always have somebody. Well, I've been talking to so-and-so about it, and so-and-so's been talking to me about it. Valuable. And they always say, yeah, but I would rather... The reality is if you haven't suffered, it's very hard to relate. It's very hard for people to know that you care if you haven't suffered. It's hard. I'm not saying they can't, but it's hard. And so those sufferings create in us this ability to connect on a very human level. They create in us this ability to connect on a spiritual level. They create in us an ability to relate Scripture to suffering people on a contextual level. Here is why the Bible says this, this, and this. Oh. I remember talking to teenagers about premarital sex. And everybody always says, oh, Bible's just a fun killer. And I go, what's interesting though? When you start talking about it from a practical point of view, and you start working your way through the lack of familial unit, all the things that kids grow up in, and it's amazing how many times they always go, it is relatable, because you start talking to the sufferings that they have seen. You start talking to the things that they've seen. And the reality is learning to contextualize spirituality to sufferers allows us to see growth. But it also, for us, it produces a perseverance. The more we suffer, the more we have to persevere. And the more we have to persevere, the more we learn to persevere. This is really one of the great connections to glory, is perseverance. You cannot see character in your life if you don't learn to persevere. People who can't persevere have no character. That's just the reality of it. It's just, you can sit there and you can say to yourself, I can be a total pessimist and still have great character. The reality is it's one thing to be a funny pessimist, You know, but it's another thing to be a genuine, like the world sucks and we're all gonna die. And you know, okay, you know, I mean, basically, I consider that sort of Twitter Christianity. You know, so we go to the great theologian Rocky Balboa, who said, it ain't how hard you hit, it's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. It's how much you can take and keep moving forward. That's how winning's done. Right? That is one of my favorite lines in the history of movies. Right? Because it's life. Life is about how much you can get hit and keep moving forward. And you learn how much you can take, but you also learn how much you can overcome. And people suffering and going through things creates this power, this ability to know you can get up. That's what perseverance is. That you can continue to push and push and push, even though you might get knocked down. That's why one of the best things that can ever happen is losing. It really is, and I'm telling you as a coach, there is nothing better than a well-timed loss. You learn more about yourself in that moment than you ever will with winning every game ever. Losing is important. Losing teaches you not only the value of winning, but what it's going to take next time to not lose. What it's going to take to push through, what it's going to take to persevere, what it's going to take to fight through it. And as Christians sometimes, you know, like I said, it amazes me how many times I see the metaphorical clipboard fly in the air. I quit. I see so many people walk away from God because something bad happened in their life. Obviously, He's not real. Because something bad happened in your life? Obviously, this doesn't work. Obviously, this is foolishness. And I'm saying, but look at the things you could do with that experience that make people's lives better around you. And we just go, no, okay, you can't use it, can't use it. And I'm thinking, there's millions of people that could. There are so many people in this world I can't reach because I just don't have that moment. I don't have that ability to sit down and go, I get it. But man, we as a church, we do. As the church, as the global body of believers, we can show, look, I started here, it was horrible, I got knocked down. And I got floored. And I'll be honest with you, I stayed on the mat a little while. But I got up. You know, I mean, that's right, that's every Rocky movie ever made. Right? It really is, right? I mean, he gets knocked down, right? He's bleeding, talking some kind of weird Italian, you know, version of English, right? He pops back up and then he gets knocked down and pops back up and he gets knocked down and pops back up and he gets knocked down. In the end, he never really wins, right? He ends it all with a loss. You haven't seen the last one? Thanks for running for it. You know, but in the end, it starts with a loss and ends with a loss, right? You guys never seen Rocky? Good Lord, you.
Which one? Like 24?
So the first one and the last one. That was democracy beating communism. And he lost to Paul. Anyway, and when he beat Clubber Lang, who did he lose? Burgess Meredith. Right? Lost Nick.
Yeah.
You know, when he beat Tommy Gunn, that was a big one. Everybody remembers that.
Did you rewatch all these movies for this summer?
Huh?
Did you rewatch all these movies for this summer?
No, I don't have to. I'll watch Rocky every time it's on. Especially the last one. Oh, the last one. Perfect ending. Anyway, until it makes us up. You know, but the idea that it is, it's about this sort of system. And then Christians should lead the market on getting up. Christians should lead the market on perseverance. Because in that perseverance is ultimately, you know, biblically, where we find character. And then ultimately that character, which we'll talk about these two next week, that character produces hope. You know, as Christians, we need to work on our perseverance sometimes. You know, and I know it's hard, but it's accepting the fact that sometimes, man, there's rough days. And I don't just mean rough days and something that happens to you. Sometimes it happens to people around you. Sometimes it happens to what's going on in your circle, whatever. And there's these sort of up and down moments. But we have an ability to push through. And one of the things that I try really hard, especially to model for I work with a lot of kids, right? So I try to model for them, I don't get knocked over every time the wind blows. Because that to me is super important in Christianity. is that, what'd you think about that horrible thing that happened today? Well, I mean, we got to keep pushing forward, right? I mean, that's all we can do. What did you learn? What can you do? When you're talking to kids from our Little League baseball team all the way through high school, and you're talking to them, and they're, they just boom, and then you're going, hey, get up. We had a kid yesterday. I mean, rough day for this kid, and I mean that literally. I mean, when you're a little kid, and when you let your team down, baseball, there's nowhere to hide. Football, kid scores a winning touchdown. Guess whose fault it is? You don't know. Most people don't know. The crowd thinks they know, but like Bill Belichick said, the reality is you don't. Because you don't know whose job it was to do whatever you think they were supposed to be doing. In baseball, we had a kid yesterday. We lost a game in the bottom of the 7th inning. Lazy fly ball to center field. Tying go ahead and run second, third base, 2 outs. Bang. Kid runs over. I got it. Boom. Right off his mitt. And this kid's a stud center fielder. Boom. Right off his mitt. We lost a game in the tournament. The kid falls to his knee and starts crying. Right? Because there's nowhere to hide. Right? There's nowhere to hide in baseball. I tell Marcus it's an individual sport wrapped in a team. Right? That's baseball. Because nowhere to hide when you strike out, nowhere to hide when you fall down, nowhere to hide when you make a mistake. No. And this poor kid falls right to his knees, and he's sitting out there crying, and of course you got all the moms in the crowd like, oh, and I'm like, well, I get it, moms are better than you. And I walk out, and I grab him by the back of his shirt. He's the littlest guy on our team, he's probably like 85, 90 pounds. I pull him straight up, and I go, get up. And he's like, I let the team down. And I'm like, and you'll pick them up tomorrow. You can wail and cry all you want, but the reality is this is not the place. Now you're gonna pick yourself up, and you're gonna go make the plays tomorrow. And he's kind of there, tears rolling down his face. I'm like, there's nothing you can do. You can't go back and catch it. You had your moment. You dropped it. But now you're gonna get your moment again tomorrow. Now go. And it's like, that's how we have to be sometimes. I get it if you want to cry over a fly ball that you dropped. But the reality is we have to, as Christians, we need to lead the market on getting up and moving forward. Doesn't mean that we're uncaring, it doesn't mean that we're unfeeling. It means that I can lend context to his moment. To him, it was the biggest flop of his life. To me, it's, you'll forget about it by the time you get to dinner. Because you're 13 and Xbox is calling. And I think that's how we're supposed to be when we have those experiences. I've made plenty of mistakes on the baseball field. I've made a lot of errors, and I get over them really fast now. Why? Because I've made so many. I don't look at one as more important than the other, and I think sometimes as Christians, when we go through suffering, we have to remember that I got to look back and go, how many times have I been through this? How many times have I been through loss? How many times have I been through pain? How many times have I been through depression? How many times have I been through anxiety? How many times have I felt lack of peace? And then you look and you get all the way through and you're like, and here I am again. And it's gonna happen tomorrow. Now, we can, every time something bad happens, we can go straight to the floor, or we can stay upright and fight. And we push ourselves through it, and we work ourselves through it. And it's hard, and sometimes, and there are pains that are way worse than others. But the reality is there's always somebody that can benefit from it. There's somebody who can listen, somebody who's gonna need your time, somebody who's gonna need your testimony, somebody who's gonna need your truth, somebody's gonna need your perseverance. Because if they see you persevere through what they themselves think they can't get through, then you can help build character in somebody else. And I say this, that's what I've learned most through my friendship with Gabe over the years. Right? I mean, it's not even, I know as much as everybody thinks it's because we're like the same sense of humor, we're both sports fans. The honest truth is, I've watched him persevere. And he's not an angry, mad, because you can persevere and have no character too. But, he has character and hope, and I've seen him persevere awful, awful things. And I've learned more. He has taught me more because I've watched him. And he has never once said, let me tell you how to get through that. He's just walked through it. And many of you have your thing. Many of you have multiples, probably, right? Because once you get to about 20, you start packing them up, right? But the reality is all you guys have your sufferings. All you guys have your perseverance. All you guys have your character. of you, hopefully we'll start seeing hope in spite of it. And I think to me that is the ultimate reality of the church, is that we should all be modeling those. Like I said, we'll talk about character, what it actually means biblically next week, and hope. But this week, when you get a chance to get knocked down, and it'll come, get up. Get up. And you got to give yourself a little Rocky speech when you're on the ground, do it. Right? I do it all the time. I actually say it every time I kneel down to pick something up. Life's about getting up. You can do it. Come on. Knees are cracking. But it really is. So let's pray, and we're going to receive our offering. I almost forgot. And get y'all out of here. Go enjoy this absolutely tremendous spring day. So Father, we just pray your blessing this morning over our offering. We pray your blessing over those in this church and their tremendous and amazing generosity towards you. God, we pray for so many people we have traveling this week. I know baseball and motorcycle rides, and graduations, and all the things that we have going on this week. God, I pray that you just bring everybody back safely. God, give us an opportunity this week to really work on our perseverance. As we'll talk next week about what it means to actually have character in the midst of perseverance, God, that we can grow in our ability to take the hard knocks and be examples of people who live out godly perseverance in our lives. We ask all this in your name. Amen.